I had everything money could buy, but my heart was completely empty. When I met her at that small cafe, pretending to be just another regular guy, she made me feel alive for the first time in years. Then came that one text message that shattered everything I thought I knew about love. Have you ever been so desperate for real love that you'd lie about who you are? I did exactly that, and what happened next changed my entire life. If you've ever felt lonely despite having everything, hit that like button. Subscribe because this story gets more intense with every minute. Let me tell you about the loneliest time of my life. My name is Gabriel, and at 32, I had more money than most people could dream of. I owned a successful tech company, lived in a penthouse that overlooked the entire city, and could buy anything I wanted with a single phone call. But here's the thing nobody tells you about being wealthy. Money attracts everyone except the people you actually want to be around. Every morning, I'd wake up in my empty apartment, surrounded by expensive furniture that felt cold and meaningless. The silence was deafening. I'd make coffee with my $1,000 machine and stare out at the city below, watching normal people rush to their normal jobs, living their normal lives. And I envied every single one of them. The women I met at charity galas and business events all had the same look in their eyes when they found out who I was. It wasn't love or even genuine interest. It was calculation. They'd suddenly become more interested, laugh a little louder at my jokes, touch my arm a little more often. I could practically see the dollar signs reflecting in their pupils. After my last relationship ended, when I caught her taking photos of my credit cards, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find someone who could love me for who I really was, not what I had in my bank account. But to do that, I'd have to become someone completely different. I remember the morning I put my plan into action. I went to my walk-in closet, passed all the designer suits and expensive watches, and pulled out clothes I hadn't worn since college. Faded jeans, a simple t-shirt, worn sneakers. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. For the first time in years, I looked ordinary, and it felt incredible. I drove my old Honda Civic, the car I'd kept for sentimental reasons but never used, to a neighborhood I'd never visited before. It was the kind of place where families lived, where kids rode bikes on sidewalks and people actually knew their neighbors' names. And right in the heart of it was a small cafe called Morning Brew. The moment I walked through that door, everything changed. The cafe was tiny, maybe 10 tables, with mismatched chairs and local artwork on the walls. It smelled like fresh coffee and homemade pastries. And behind the counter, with the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen, was her. She had these incredible dark eyes that seemed to light up when she looked at people, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was wearing the cafe's uniform, but somehow she made it look elegant. When she saw me standing there, probably looking lost and out of place, she smiled and said, "First time here? Don't worry, we'll take good care of you." Her voice was warm and genuine, and for a moment I forgot how to speak. This woman had no idea who I was, didn't know about my money or my company or any of it. She was just being kind to a stranger, and it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Yeah, I managed to say. "What do you recommend?" She leaned on the counter slightly, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Well, if you like it strong, our house blend is amazing. But if you want something special, try our cinnamon latte. I make the syrup myself every morning." I ordered the cinnamon latte, and when she handed it to me, our fingers touched for just a second. I swear I felt electricity shoot up my arm. She noticed too. I could see it in the way her cheeks flushed slightly. "I'm Jasmine, by the way," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Gabriel," I replied, and she repeated my name softly, like she was testing how it sounded. I found a corner table and stayed there for 2 hours, nursing that single latte and watching her work. She remembered every regular customer's order, asked about their families, genuinely cared about their days. When an elderly homeless man came in, counting change for a small coffee, she quietly gave him a pastry too, pretending it was part of some promotion. That's when I knew I was in trouble. This woman had something I'd never encountered in my world, a genuine, beautiful heart. I started coming to Morning Brew every single day. I'd create excuses, tell myself I needed the caffeine, or that it was on my way to somewhere important. But the truth was, I just needed to see her. Jasmine would light up when I walked in, and by the third day, she had my order memorized. Cinnamon latte for Gabriel, she'd say with that smile that made my knees weak. We'd talk while she worked, small conversations that meant everything to me. She told me about her dream of opening an art gallery someday, about how she was working 2 jobs to help pay for her mother's medical bills. She asked about my fake job in customer service, and I found myself creating an entire alternate life, complete with annoying coworkers and a demanding boss. The guilt of lying to her was eating me alive, but I was terrified of losing what we had. For the first time in years, someone was looking at me and seeing just Gabriel. Not Gabriel the billionaire, not Gabriel the successful businessman, just me. After 2 weeks of daily visits and increasingly longer conversations, I finally worked up the courage to ask for her number. My hands were actually shaking as I approached the counter during a quiet moment. "Jasmine," I said, my voice cracking like I was 15 again. "I was wondering, would you maybe want to get dinner sometime? Outside of here, I mean." She bit her lower lip, a habit I'd already memorized, and smiled. "I'd love that," she said, grabbing a napkin and writing her number in beautiful cursive handwriting. When she handed it to me, she added, "I was wondering when you were going to ask." That night, we texted until 3 in the morning. She told me about her favorite books, her fear of thunderstorms, the way she liked to dance when she thought no one was watching. I told her about my real dreams, my fears, everything except the truth about my money. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt like someone really knew me. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant 3 blocks from the cafe. I'd almost suggested one of the fancy places I usually went to, but caught myself just in time. Instead, we sat in a tiny booth with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, talking for hours about everything and nothing. When the check came, she insisted on splitting it. "I believe in equality," she said with a firm smile. No woman had ever done that with me. In my world, everyone expected to be taken care of, to have their meals and shopping trips and vacations paid for without question. But Jasmine pulled out her own $20 bill and placed it on the table like it was the most natural thing in the world. Walking her home that night, we stopped under a streetlight outside her apartment building. The moment felt perfect. Her hand in mine, the soft glow of the light above us, the way she looked up at me with those incredible eyes. "I had the most amazing time tonight," she whispered. "So did I said, and then I kissed her. It was soft and sweet and perfect, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just attraction or lust. This was something deeper, something real. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine and smiled. "Good night, Gabriel," she said, and I watched her disappear into her building, already counting the minutes until I could see her again. The next few weeks were the happiest of my entire life. We went on simple dates that meant everything to me. Picnics in the park where I'd bring daisies I picked from my building's garden instead of expensive roses from fancy florists. Long walks where we'd hold hands and talk about our dreams, our fears, our favorite childhood memories. One Saturday, she invited me to her apartment for a movie night. Her place was tiny, probably smaller than my walk-in closet, but it felt more like home than anywhere I'd ever been. We cuddled on her old couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn and watching romantic comedies that made her cry happy tears. "You're different from other guys I've dated," she said during a quiet moment, her head resting on my chest. "Different how?" I asked, running my fingers through her hair. "You listen. Really listen. And you're not trying to impress me with expensive things or flashy gestures. You make me feel special by being yourself." If only she knew how much being myself actually cost me every day. How hard it was to maintain this fiction when all I wanted was to give her everything she deserved. We took a weekend trip to a small lake about an hour outside the city. I booked us a modest cabin, the kind of place I never would have considered before. But with Jasmine, it felt like paradise. We spent the morning skipping stones on the water, and she tried to teach me how to dance on the small wooden dock. "You're terrible at this," she laughed as I stepped on her feet for the third time. "I never said I was a good dancer," I replied, spinning her around clumsily. "That's okay," she said, coming back into my arms. "I like that you try." We watched the sunrise together, wrapped in a blanket on the dock, and she called me her beautiful miracle. I'd never felt wealthy in the ways that truly mattered until that moment. But the guilt was growing stronger every day. Every time she talked about money stress, about picking up extra shifts at her second job, about having to choose between groceries and her mother's medication, I felt like the worst person alive. I had enough money to solve all her problems in an instant, but I couldn't tell her without risking everything we'd built. One evening, she introduced me to her mother and her closest friends. Her mom, despite being weak from treatments, welcomed me with open arms and thanked me for making her daughter so happy. Her friends, real friends who'd known her for years, accepted me immediately into their group. Sitting around that small dinner table, listening to them tease each other and share stories, I felt more at home than I ever had in any boardroom or fancy restaurant. This was what I'd been missing my entire life. Genuine human connection, people who cared about each other for real reasons. That night I made a decision. I was going to tell Jasmine everything. I planned the perfect evening. Dinner at our special spot by the lake, under the stars where we'd shared our first weekend together. I even bought a ring. Nothing too flashy, just something simple and beautiful like her. I was ready to give up everything for her. The loneliness, the fake relationships, the empty success. None of it mattered if I couldn't share my real life with the woman I loved. But then my phone buzzed with a text message that made my blood run cold. "Hey babe, found out who you really are. We need to talk." I stared at that message for what felt like hours, my world crashing down around me. The money emoji at the end felt like a knife in my heart. Everything I'd feared was happening. She knew who I really was, and now everything was going to change. My hands were shaking as I drove to her apartment. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Maybe she'd found out accidentally. Maybe someone had recognized me. Maybe there was still a chance to explain, to make her understand why I'd lied. But when she opened the door, I saw printed photos scattered on her coffee table. Pictures of me at charity events, articles about my company, photos of my penthouse that must have been from some lifestyle magazine. Her eyes were red from crying. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "A week," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "My friend Angela works at a bank downtown. She saw you coming out of a meeting with some executives and recognized you from the business section. She thought I should know who I was really dating." The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Everything I'd been terrified of was written on her face. The hurt, the betrayal, the realization that our entire relationship had been built on a lie. "Jasmine, please let me explain," I started, but she held up her hand. "Explain what, Gabriel?" "How you've been lying to me for months, how you've been pretending to be someone you're not, while I've been completely honest with you about everything." Tears were streaming down her face, and each one felt like it was tearing a piece of my heart out. "How could you watch me struggle with money, watch me work 2 jobs, listen to me worry about my mom's medical bills and say nothing? You could have helped, but instead you just watched me suffer while you pretended to be poor." The accusation hit me like a physical blow because it was true. I had watched her struggle, had wanted to help so desperately, but had been too afraid of losing her to risk it. "It wasn't about the money," I said desperately. "I fell in love with you, the real you, and I wanted you to love the real me, not my bank account." She looked at me with eyes full of pain and disappointment. "But this isn't the real you, Gabriel. The real you is someone who can lie to someone they claim to love for months. The real you is someone who doesn't trust me enough to be honest." I reached for her, but she stepped back, and that small movement broke something inside me. "So what happens now?" I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. She wiped her tears and looked at me with a strength I'd always admired but now feared. "Now I need time to figure out if the man I fell in love with ever really existed, or if he was just another lie. What do you think happened next? Did our love survive the truth, or did my lies destroy everything? The ending will shock you in ways you never expected. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe, because love stories like this need to be shared. Comment below. Would you forgive someone who lied about their identity for love?